Neversoft. You obviously know them from the classic Tony Hawk games, but not a lot of people know of their previous work, which is a perfect reason to highlight and relive this underrated gem. Aside from a licensed Skeleton Warriors game on the Sega Saturn, Neversoft had a few games they were working on for Crystal Dynamics and Sony, but were eventually cancelled. The work was not for naught, as the engine they had built for those games came in handy when they signed a deal with Activision to finish Apocalypse, starring Fifth Element's own Bruce Willis. This engine was later used to power the ultimate skateboarding fantasy that was Tony Hawk, that would shock the gaming world to its foundations. Unlike Apocalypse though. Small jab aside, I have got nothing but love for this game. Originally, the game was supposed to have McClane as an AI partner for a buddy cop movie theme, but that was apparently too ahead of its time and the PS1 couldn't handle that technical load. And they assumed players would rather want to play as Butch Coolidge, so they made the choice to promote Harry Stamper to the main role.
Try to play me against my partner again, I will fuck you up.
But because the recording was already done and Corbin was probably too expensive to get back, they trimmed the voice work down to simple one-liners and a few story-essential lines of dialogue. So now that the backstory and excuses are done, let's get to the actual game.
Let's get down to business.
We're greeted with a, for that time, cool CGI sequence. The animations are a bit iffy now, but okay for the time. It was motion captured, so where the iffiness came from, no clue. One and done would be my guess, since it was shot in 2 days. The vibe was cool though, very Blade Runner-esque. Another game for another time. The story presented here was confusing though. In short, there's an evil scientist called the Reverend that wants to start the apocalypse.
Hey, that's the name of the game!
And so he creates the 4 horsemen. For some reason, every game has a different set of horsemen. This one has
Death! Tear the flesh from the heathen bones! Plague! Devour them with pestilence! War! Cast their corpses to the fire! Beast! Turn their cities to ash!
Be that as they may, the only one that could stop him is his protege, Trey Kincaid. After being thrown in jail and threatened to have his salad tossed, Corbin has some, I assume, nanomachine tech multi-purpose weapon stashed somewhere and makes his escape. Why he's also a wisecracking slaughter machine is anyone's guess, but Butch Coolidge can do anything he puts his mind to.
Butch. What does it mean?
I'm an American, honey. Our names don't mean shit.
When I first saw this game at a friend's house and he explained the controls to me, he told me I had to shoot with the face buttons. I looked at him with disbelief, assuming he was taking me for a fool. He was adamant though, and lo and behold, he was right. This took a lot to get used to, but I played it for a bit and loved every second of it. Once I got the game myself, I needed to get my hands on one of those sweet DualShock controllers.
Glorious!
This changed everything, and the improved accuracy made everything a hell of a lot easier. It was my first twin-stick shooter on console as far as I can remember, and even though there are a few other games of that ilk that I played, like Spartan Assault, Warhammer Kill Team, Geometry Wars, none, however, enthralled me like Apocalypse did. When you get dropped into the first prison level, one of the first things I noticed were the graphics, which to me looked amazing. The colors were beautiful and vibrant, the empty shells that dropped on the floor had that pleasant sound we all know and love. The action is fast-paced, with dodging bullets and returning the favor with bullets of your own, and the verbal assaults Frankie Moses loves to hurl at his opponents, or victims, depending on who you ask.
People never think how things affect the family of a henchman.
Explosions were big and impactful, there were copious amounts of blood, and beheadings and the severance of limbs were not an odd occurrence. It felt good to shoot, with plenty of feedback in the rumble, and that still applies today. When it comes to controls, it's all very straightforward. You've got your directional aiming, You can jump, which has Malcolm Crowe reach ridiculous heights. A smart bomb to dispatch a screen full of enemies when they get too close. There is a crouch button, which can be used for cover shooting, making this one of the first cover shooting mechanics to my knowledge. Kind of. It's mostly used for rolling away though. You can change weapons that auto switches to your rifle once depleted. Very welcome, since they run out of ammo rather quickly. Speaking of, there's a nice variety of those as well. Apart from your standard rifle, you can find homing rockets, regular straightforward, I assume more powerful ones, a chain lightning gun, the classic bouncy grenades, pulse ammo that straight up reminds me of the Unreal Pulse rifle. You have this sweet laser that cuts foes in half, and my favorite, the flamethrower. So look at this. Super sick. Jesus. The levels themselves were varied, with lots of height differences, or verticality as they like to call it nowadays. You also aim high and low automatically depending on where your enemies are located. Much appreciated. You've got your prison level, the street, which later turned into a volcanic erupted city, a graveyard, caves, rooftops, and a sewer level that isn't annoying. Extra points for that. Special attention was given to camera work, which is for the most part very well done. There are some off-screen enemies, but that's not as prevalent as you'd expect.
I hate that shit!
Neversoft has done some really creative camera work as well, switching perspectives on a regular basis that really give a sense of variety. Climbing on a rope across a chasm beneath, side-scrolling antics, top-down shooting, running towards the camera, a third-person perspective. The attention wasn't lost on me and I appreciated it.
Who gives a fuck?
There are some crossroads with alternate routes to take, but only a handful, and usually there's not that much of a change, but it's still cool that they're there. Between each level you get a score screen to see the percentage of enemies you've killed, which leads up to a fancy cinematic. Interesting note, I always thought this to be quite confusing.
This looks like the right spot. Nice polygons.
They're made of polygons? Some Blade Runner replicant thing going on in that universe? Or is John Hartigan just ad-libbing off script again?
Fuck you.
Anyway, these cutscenes, like in most games in the 90s, felt like a reward for completing a level. And the reason for that is most likely because of the difference gap in the quality of graphics. Nowadays, graphics look good enough to pass as CGI, so those pre-rendered cutscenes don't give that same oomph that they did back then. Unless it's the Blizzard or Warhammer cinematics, of course. Can't top those. 10 out of 10. Anyway, I like the cutscenes. Apart from some weird shooting during this elevator scene. What the hell is he shooting at? Apart from that, cool stuff. There are also jumping sections which show the aforementioned ridiculous heights that Malcolm Crowe could reach. Most are mandatory for level progression, of course.
Who knew?
But a lot of secrets could only be reached by jumping those heights. Getting that extra smart bomb, life or weapon ammo is always a delight. Unless you die trying to get those, then, well, at least you try. Finding these secrets always feels rewarding though, despite it sometimes costing you more than it gains you. I should say, the last two levels do have a high difficulty spike that do show the shortcomings of the platforming sections.
Somebody call the ambulance.
I died more times in those levels than I did all the levels before it combined. Usually it works fine, with a shadow projected on the floor to show your location, but some camera positions do make certain jumps confusing. It causes some annoyance, which is a shame, because the game is mostly annoyance-free. Most of the levels also have these full motion videos on billboards that have this really classic 90s aesthetics and really sells you on the world.
Target 9842B is approaching Sector 6. All Sector 6 units fire when ready. Goal is termination.
Or sells you on buying the albums of the artists. The tracks were performed by some, to me, lesser known artists like Poe or Poe, not sure. But also popular bands like System of a Down. Very Neversoftish and a sign of things to come eventually. I loved the music, which was very techno and metal and suited the game perfectly. One thing I didn't like, or well, after a time at least, were the one-liners that David Dunn can't resist shouting out repeatedly.
These guys need a little bit more lead in their diet. Oh, you want some too? Ooh, that felt great. Can't we all just get along? Ooh, that felt great. Trick or treat! Oh, you want some? Oh, you want some too? Can't we just be friends? No, we can't. Strap one on. It's time to jam. Ooh, that's got it. Yay!
Although fun at first, they got repetitive then and certainly do now. Nothing to be bothered about. After a while, you kind of phase them out.
Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Damn, I feel good.
There isn't a whole lot of enemy variety by today's standards, but for this kind of game back then, it was plenty. You have your prison guards, inmates that all have a gripe with you, helicopters, I assume police officers, tanks in different shapes and sizes, bats and zombies, the dead will walk the earth and such, crocodiles, sewer dwellers or mutated homeless people, not sure yet, hellhounds, punk-style cronies that lob grenades, impeccably dressed demons, and robots that can be burned to death for some reason. Oversight? Or morbid human cross-cybernetic engineering? Some have green blood though. And what would a twin-stick story shooter be without bosses? Of course, we have the previously mentioned Four Horsemen. We have the introductory giant tank to start things off with. In the sewer we get to fight Killer Croc. These bosses aren't very difficult, but they are interesting nonetheless, with some having a few phases. Trial and error for sure, but nothing you probably can't handle. Harder difficulties might be, as dodging and staying on the move is essential, and health isn't steadily provided. Van Hellington tip: save the special ammo for these events, at least half. Boss encounters will always provide you with plenty of special ammo though, so don't deprive yourself of some extra crispy themes.
Thanks for the advice.
As far as I know, there's no incentive to complete this on the hardest difficulty, other than boasting you did. Which I did back in the day.
I don't believe you.
It's fun playing through it multiple times, discovering new secrets and picking alternate routes, but the experience will be the same every time. You could try and kill everything to get the highest percentage, but without any unlockables to speak of, it seems like time wasted. Well spent, but wasted. If that makes any sense. So, while we're at the subject of time spent, how was my time overall, reliving this nostalgia fest? Well, after watching this, it should probably come as no surprise that I enjoyed my time shooting through this game. Taking into account that the production of this game was taken over and finished in less than 9 months, the results are surprisingly good. From a technical perspective, it is a slam dunk. Graphics look great, sound is very good, McClane quip repetition aside, and the overall feel is remarkably well done. However, the jumping, while okay at first, did cause me some annoyance in the last 2 stages. While the game goes on a steady pace, alternating between normal bosses and the 4 horsemen, the last 2 levels feel notably rushed. During level 5 I was thinking, man, how many levels does this game have? As the levels have a reasonably long length. Only 7, not counting the bosses, which would add 4 more. Had the development been a little longer, which it could have, as the release didn't coincide with a movie, then it would have been even better. The last boss was a bitch though. Took me a longer time to bring him down than I'd like to admit. The ending cinematic is a bit weird too, and felt extremely rushed as well. A bit of a yada 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 sequel, and credits, rushed. I won't show it, in case you want to play it someday, and you should. It holds up well, and still is a blast to, well, blast through. To me, this was the first game where an actor had his face and voice in a video game, which was special in and of itself. But to have Hudson Hawk as the leading role? That's a W for me. All puns and name dropping aside, I loved this game. And I was, still am, and will always be, a big fan of Bruce Willis. Especially with all the news regarding his health lately, I more than ever felt the need to revisit this underrated gem from my teenhood. Would I have bought the game if he wasn't in it? Not sure, but because I played it at a friend's place and I had some hands-on experience, and those short 5 minutes were amazing. Conclusion? Does it hold up?
Oh, hell yeah!
If you can play it in some way, do it. Buy it, procure it by some means, and enjoy yourself. It's not a long playthrough, 2 hours maybe, but it is a guaranteed good time. And with the time and condition this game was made in, that's all you could ask for. Hell of a job, Neversoft. Hell of a job. If you liked this video, smart bomb that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon with the next one.